There you go. There are the top 10 spells that you have in Disney Sorcerers Arena and that I recommend going for. Well, that video is now worthless. I was not planning to do a new top 10 spells video anytime soon, but with the changes, here we go. Welcome to the Cozy Club. My name's Cozy Gamer, and today we are exactly going to go after that. The top 10 spells in Disney Sorcerers Arena. Spells were just simply making too much of an impact in battles, whether you were using your favorite character and a spell would just counter them completely, or a new character would come out and they really weren't that good because the spell could just counter their debuffs immediately. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me what my opinion is on this, and yes, it is frustrating. You've gone after something like Blue Fairy Magic and now that spell is now useless. However, I do think that this was the right decision overall for both the longevity and health of the game. I know me personally, I loved a lot of characters. Let's take Frozone for example, and he was a good character. However, he put slow out there, and because Wand existed, it just simply countered him too quickly for him to be a good character to use in the top teams in DSA. I do know myself, I just got Blue Fairy Magic, and guess what? I enjoyed it for a few days and now it's nerfed to oblivion. And spoiler alert, it's not even on the top 10 anymore. Now we're going to start doing a lot more of a scheduled release to my videos, as well as I'm going to be doing some news and content update videos that are a little shorter and less of my video guides every single week. That way we provide more content to you guys and you can hang out at the Cozy Club even more. So you don't miss any of that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. And if you can't get enough of the Cozy Club, I do stream on Twitch, averaged about 3 times a week, and you can find the link in the description below. Now I wanted to start out this video by saying that spells are not groundbreaking anymore. They're not going to completely decide a battle, and this was a good change and all. Now, you're going to want to really focus on the team that you're using and make sure you have spells that complement them, but overall, this is the top 10 spells that I think are the best in DSA. I know each and every day we're finding out new team compositions and spells to match up with those team compositions, so make sure you look in the Discord that I have or on the general Discord to see what exactly is trending with certain teams so that you're best equipped to the best you can in DSA. All right, now, so if you did miss the last top 10 spells video, let's go ahead and take a look at the graphic from that video just so we can see exactly how far things have changed by the end of this video. Now, number 1 is going to be the Blue Fairy Magic, and obviously there's some big changes to that one. They pretty much nerfed that completely. You had Splash Mountain at number 2. Number 3 was Foul Play. Number 4 was Golden Hammer. And at the bottom, we did have Mortal Potion. Now, things did change drastically. You're going to see some of these spells still in the top 10, but we do have some new arrivals and a different shift in the order completely. All right, now that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the top 10 spells, starting with the honorable mentions. Now, first, we're going to look at Fairy Slumber as an honorable mention. Now, Fairy Slumber wasn't even looked at before the nerf to spells, and what it does essentially is it puts the main target to sleep for 2 turns and the adjacent targets to sleep for 1 turn. Now, on offense, you can make sure you can concentrate on what enemies you're hitting and avoid the sleeping ones. So on offense, I do think this spell could break the top 10, but because it's so poor on defense, this is the honorable mention for me. Next up for honorable mentions, we have Duke Caboom, and Duke Caboom was in the top 10. It fell out a bit, and it still could have a very strong case of making the top 10. It's a very early spell, it's easy to get, it does great damage, and it puts vulnerability on the enemies. Now, if you're focused on getting critical damage hits on the enemies, like with an Incredibles team, this is a great spell to put in your lineup. And don't forget, guys, just because it's not in the top 10 spell doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. And the last one, now this is the beginning of the fall of the Titans. You're going to be looking at Foul Play. Now, Foul Play, it could break some people's top 10s as well. It wasn't good enough to break my top 10. It purges 1 helpful effect now, and if you have Aladdin characters, it can shake that up a little bit on how many people are going to receive it. This was primarily used to get rid of taunt, and now that it doesn't do that, it really doesn't serve as big of a use in battle. It does still put out a great amount of damage, and you could make a case of using it with a complete Aladdin team. I just don't find myself using Foul Play anymore, especially because you do either have to purchase the spell or go all in for the Aladdin team. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to the top 10 spells themselves, starting out with number 10, Heat's Shadow. Now, for most of you watching this, I know that you went through the trenches of beating Tower 3. For us global players, it was not easy to get oceanic characters to conquer this tower, but if you did beat the tower successfully, you received Pete's Shadow or Peter Pan's Shadow. Now, I struggled if this should make the top 10. However, I am just seeing so much use out of this spell. Now, this spell was mainly used for PvE before the nerf, as it was really good to put with Dr. Facilier, and he would be able to heal your teammates up when you were going through the towers. However, now it's finding a good use in PvP. I do know for myself, with the new Frozen team that's arrived, I've been using this spell with Spin, and my gosh, it's a ton of fun. Now, the cool thing about this spell is it's going to copy 45% of the statistics of your main character, and it's going to give them haste, so they're going to have a chance to move pretty quickly. Now, the thing that is crazy about this spell is that it does also copy the passive of the character that you're cloning. There are some more deadly combinations with this spell, and just go ahead and look through all the characters' passives and think to yourself, what passive would I like to have twice or more on my team? All right, next up, we have the first rise and fall of one of the best spells in the game from the Iron Throne. That is going to be Splash Mountain. Now, Splash Mountain used to be a really good spell. It would go ahead and increase the cooldowns on the enemies that you're fighting. However, now that only happens to the primary target. What this spell is also good for is it's going to have a 50% chance to increase the debuffs that are out on the field. So you're going to get some good damage out there, lower the cooldowns on someone that's super important to shut down. And then if you have stun or sleep or one of the other stronger debuffs out there, you can go ahead and extend those and keep those enemies out of the fight for even longer. Now, overall, I think this is going to be good to use with certain team compositions. And if you have something like Fairy Slumber, or if you have stuns out in the field, this is going to be a good choice, and it's still decent to throw in with your team. All right, now moving on to number 8, we are going to have a newcomer into the top 10, and that is going to be Simba. That's going to be Spirit of Mufasa. Alrighty, now the reason this has gone and jumped into the top 10 is because now Foul Play can't just come in and rip all those helpful buffs that you just put onto your team. It's going to do something a little bit different for each member on the team. Offensive heroes are going to get a offense up, defense is going to get defense up, and if you're a support character like Anna, you're going to go ahead and get a critical guarantee on your character. Now, something to not be slept on is you're going to now have these buffs on the field for up to 3 turns. So having defense up or offense up for 3 turns and no way to get rid of it is the reason why this spell cracks a top 10. And I'm seeing a lot of the meta players using this in their team to try to get out more attack and get the enemy killed before they can really do anything to respond. Alrighty, now we're going to go to number 7, and that's going to be Mortal Potion. Alright, now Mortal Potion is a strong AoE spell, and it really does something that's one of a kind. And that's going to be one of the few things that can get rid of buffs on the field. Now, if you go ahead and place Mortal Potion on the primary target, you're going to strip 2 helpful effects from them. And then the ones on the side, if you have mythical characters, and remember, we want to pair these spells up with the right teams. So with a team full of mythical characters, you can increase your chances of getting rid of helpful effects on the adjacent opponents. Now, this is a major counter to buff heavy teams currently, because this can at least slow them down. And I know that Hades is used a lot in the top meta, so when paired with him, you're going to have more continuous damage on the field, thus being able to get more of that offense heavy squad up. If you pair this with one other spell, it really gets the ball rolling, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but this kind of keeps the offensive spells alive, and it has AoE damage, which is a nice touch now that spells altogether have been nerfed. It's also going to put the opposite of the helpful effect on the enemy, which is a nice touch and really going to completely control the battlefield a bit more. It is a bit slow, so you might see your opponent use their spells first, but when you play this right, it's going to do a great strategic advantage for your team. All right, now moving right along, we're going to go ahead and go to number 6, and that is going to be the Claw. So the Claw is still a very good spell. They didn't touch the Claw, so nothing changed with it. They did touch the spell charge rate for a lot of the spells, and this one is still super fast, and you're going to be overwhelming your opponent with a lot of AoE damage. The spell still works great against the Aladdin crew or anything with evasion, as you're going to strip evasion off with the first drop of the little aliens, and then after that, you're going to be putting on the big hit. The thing I want to mention is with the new Frozen team out, this is actually a great semi-counter to them. First of all, if you don't know, Frozen teams aren't great handling a ton of AoE because they kind of hide behind Kristoff. And second, this spell specializes and getting rid of summoned characters. Now, I've seen a lot of people, and including myself, I put Peach Shadow on my Sven and I start overwhelming the opponent with a lot of attack. However, with the Claw, you're going to quickly wipe out those shadows and you won't have to worry about them as much. So effectively, why you see this being used so much is in PvE. It's great in towers against those fairy folk that keep on putting on evasion, or it's just great tackling either the meta teams currently with it being frozen and kingdom characters having evasion or summons. Number 5, moving on to the next Toy Story spell. And let me just say real quick, if you don't have them already, when the next Toy Story event comes by, get these spells. They're all good and they weren't really touched, so make sure you go after these spells. Now, Bucket of Soldiers. Now, if you looked at my last video, Bucket of Soldiers was ranked number 5, and guess what? It didn't move. Now, it's better in the in-game, and we're going to get to that in a second, but overall, this spell does exactly what it's supposed to do and what it did previously. You're going to be using these soldiers, and they're going to attack each time you put out a basic. Now, I've seen this being a lot used more with these Finn comps that are going out there, as Finn also assists, so you're going to be having a lot more basics put onto the opponent. Now, this spell was once nerfed. They got rid of the charge time, which was more of a glitch than it was a nerf or a buff for the spell. However, this is still the go-to spell for both early and mid-game. And now in late game, it's more important to be pumping out those damages, especially on the taunting characters. Support or defense characters, rather, got a big buff with their taunts not being able to get stripped as easy. So people like Mr. Incredible, you're going to have to put out a lot of damage on them. And this is a great way and why you see a lot of more in-game users using Bucket of Soldiers. Once you get up to level 3, you're going to have 3 soldiers go every single time that the bucket gets a turn. You can also put taunts on the bucket. There's a lot of many useful uses for this. Overall, if you think your team needs an extra sizzle to it, this is a good spell to put with it. I'm currently using this and I'm never disappointed with my Bucket of Soldiers. All right, now moving on to number 4, and that is going to be a newcomer. And not only that, my friends, it's a newcomer that makes the top 4, and that is going to be Dad Moves. Now, first of all, if you haven't seen Onward, you should go ahead and watch it. It's a great movie. It's got some tug on the heartstrings, but it's also just funny and a good time. However, Dad Moves, or Dad Pants as I like to call them, has seen a massive increase in viability. Now, what it does is it's going to put out silence on all the enemies, but on top of that, you also have a high chance to put offensive down on the enemies. So the reason this saw such a high increase from viability from the out of the top 10 to now number 4 is because mainly that debuffs are so much stronger. You used to put this on the enemy team and you would have silence and offense down, but then when Blue Fairy Magic was used, you would just actually be giving the enemy team an advantage. Now that debuffs are harder to get rid of, you put silence out there and the enemies now can't cleanse it. So this is kind of the new Splash Mountain by shutting down the abilities of the enemy team. Even spells like the Headless Horseman has made its way up the charts, not exactly honorable mention territory, but it can put out silence, and silence is a very strong debuff in this game. Now I'm frustrated because I didn't go and get Dad Moves whenever it came out, as I was like, it's just not that good of a spell, and now I'm missing out on one of the best spells in the game. Now, it is a little bit slow charging. However, you can use other spells first, like the Claw, and then throw in Dad Moves to really cripple your opponent. So this spell overall works really great with other spells, and if you see the Onward event come back, make sure you go and try to unlock this thing because it is strong, my friends. Alrighty, now moving on to number 3, and that is going to be Cauldron. Now, Cauldron was in the honorable mentions, I believe, last video, but now it has made its way and broken into the top 3. Now, this game is all about putting offensive heavy abilities out there, and why Cauldron is so good is that it allows you to use your abilities more and more by decreasing the cooldowns on your allies. The allies that get these magic or the cooldown decreases, they're going to also get a 10% speed buff. Now, there's a bug now not working with the speed mechanic. However, it's also charging currently when it's not supposed to, kind of like what happened with Bucket of Soldiers. Now, with Cauldron, the thing is, it counts as an ability or basic being used. So if you have Bucket of Soldiers with the Cauldron, they're going to move together. So each time Cauldron activates, you're gonna have the Bucket of Soldier comes. Also, on top of that, Cauldron is the fastest charging spell in the game, so it should be ready enough for you to use consistently. All right, we're up to the final 2, and that is going to be Golden Hammer coming in at number 2. Now, it was tough to decide 1 and 2 as they're both really good, but I think number 1 counters number 2 just a little bit. So we're going to go with number 2 being Golden Hammer. Our Golden Hammer was really high on our list before, and guess what? The nerfs didn't touch it. It's still a very solid spell, my friends. It's going to go ahead and revive a character if you have anyone dead. And sometimes battles can really be decided by just one character. So this is important there. If you have no characters dead, you're going to be healing up your allies and giving them speed increases. This is so powerful as you're going to overweigh the opponent and they're going to kill, let's say, your Zerg, but then you can just bring them back. And on top of that, whenever you do get damage past undefeatable, we talked about this in the last video, but when you use your abilities and then you die or undefeatable gets dispelled, you can use your abilities again with your character. Overall, this is what makes it the number 2 best spell in the game, and it's my recommendation to go after this probably first because it's the only free-to-play or accessible that's not from an event spell so high on this list. As a last note, it's even harder to get rid of the undefeatable that's on the characters as foul play can't take that anymore. So you're going to be having those stack up and you're going to kind of have all this team with a second life kit on them. This thing's just great. And also, quick plug-in, if you haven't seen Wreck-It Ralph, go see it. All right, now it's time for the number 1 spell in the game, and you probably guessed it because you haven't seen it on this list. No, it's not Wand or Blue Fairy Magic. It's going to be Wild Imagination. Now, if you love Key and Peele, the Toy Story 4 movie, this was an incredible moment in the movie. Seeing the Ducky and Bunny in the movie always had me laughing in stitches. Now, it's less of a joke in this game because, my gosh, Wild Imagination is incredible. Now, I believe it was around number 6 on my last video, but let me tell you, this puts out a heal block. It puts out continuous damage. It charges pretty fast, and you can keep on pumping out the damage on the enemy team. This is why I put it over the Golden Hammer, as it's going to put heal block and it's going to effectively shut down Golden Hammer as well. Pair this with Mortal Potion and you're really going to be putting a lot of debuffs on that team before the spell nerfs, and I think overall this takes the cake for the best spell in the game. The heal block is just so huge, having it on the enemy characters for 3 turns, and I believe once they buff the healers in the game, this is going to be even more important. So investing in this spell is wise. Again, it's all the Toy Story spells seem to not have been gotten the nerf hammer, and they have survived and made some incredible spells. Bucket of Soldiers, Wild Imagination, and the Claw are all solid spells. So next time the Toy Story event comes by, make sure you grab this one first and then focus on the other ones. And that is going to do it, my friends. We went back through all of the spells 1 through 10 with some honorable mentions. That last video, I'm going to go ahead and put in the description to make sure you see this video, as this is the most up-to-date thing in DSA. Now, if you love just all things Disney, playing Disney Sorcerers Arena, and hanging out with a great community, come on and join the Twitch stream. Again, we're on Tuesday, Thursdays, sometime Fridays, and also Sundays. Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming back to the Cozy Club. We're going to have a couple of awesome videos coming out this week. So again, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss your shot on those videos coming out. And I will see you next time right here at the Cozy Club.